And this morning we come to session 2 of our book study. And I'll give the same disclaimer I gave last week. I don't very often do a book study, but when I do a book study, I call it a book study. Other places call it a Bible study, and it's really a book study. So this is a book study. And the other disclaimer I gave is I do about 3 other verse-by-verse Bible studies all during the week. So it's okay every now and then to do a book study. This is really, I guess you'd say, a worldview study. And worldview study is very important. Sometimes those of us, I think, in the church who come to church all the time, which is most of you except Mary Ellen, she's usually off at the dancing hall. But but the rest of you are pretty faithful, and you are you come to church and you study your Bible, and you have done this all through your life. And so sometimes for those of us who are always in the church and our thinking is in the faith, to stop and study worldview seems a little out of place maybe. But I think every now and then we need to do it because we live in a world that no longer has the same worldview that we have. And it used to be that the fabric of our society was basically a Judeo-Christian worldview. And so we didn't have to stop and think about these things as much. But I think we live, as to borrow the term that many others have used, we live in a post-Christian world now. That those of us who are Christians are really on the fringe of society now, rather than the heart of society now. So it's important for us to stop and see what is the world thinking and how did it get this way. So today, we are studying Karl Marx. Last week, we studied Darwin, and perhaps Marx and Darwin together have more influence on the world than any other two people that there are. In fact, it was said of Karl Marx by a lot of people. This is not a fringe thing. It has been said by many people of Karl Marx that he was the greatest thinker who ever lived. And if you go to the university, that's the idea they will have of Karl Marx. He was the greatest thinker who ever lived. Read sometime, Engel, was that his name? Frederick Engel. Frederick Engel was Marx's partner in crime, I guess you'd say, in the philosophy of Marxism. And Engel wrote a eulogy of Karl Marx when Karl Marx died. And it really does encapsulate what Marxism is. But the way you hear Engel talk, and so many others thought and think the same way, you would have thought that the Messiah died. He really has that kind of a following. Now, I want to bring up a scripture right from the beginning because probably some will think of this along the way, and that's Acts chapter 4, verse 32. It says, "The multitude of them that believed were of one heart and one soul. Neither said any of them that aught of the things which he possessed was his own, but they had all things in common." Now, that sounds like communism, doesn't it? In a sense, anyway. It certainly sounds like socialism, anyway. They had all things in common. Now, that is, without a doubt, the state of that early group of believers there in Jerusalem. They sold everything. They laid it at the apostles' feet. They said, it's all ours. Now, the statement that encapsulates Marxism more than any other is each let me get this right. What is it? Each with his own, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. From each according to his ability, to each according to his need. Now that sounds almost like something you might read in the Bible. Isn't that wonderful and stirring and poetic? If you've got ability, you give. If you've got need, you take. Now that is Marxism, really. And Karl Marx believed that if you created a society which allowed that, then it would be utopian society. Everybody who had ability would put it into the pot. Everybody who had need would take it out of the pot. And life would be utopia. In fact, he described utopian life. And he then began to make utopian life. I'll get to my notes here in a moment and then perhaps repeat myself when I see what I was supposed to have said. But as he described it, he said eventually the have-nots are going to rebel, and because the haves who have the ability, they're not giving it up. And eventually the have-nots, he called those the proletariat, they're going to rebel against the haves. He called those the bourgeois. And the proletariat against the bourgeois, the have-nots versus the have, or the 99% versus the 1%, all of it is Marxist ideology. And Marx said eventually the 99% will rebel and take from the 1%, and they'll take all that wealth of the 1% and spread it about among everybody, and the proletariat, who's much better people than the 1%, they will spread it out equally and let everybody just take from the pot as needed, and life will be grand. Of course, they experimented with this a few times, didn't they? And it always worked out, right? Actually, never, 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 never in the course of history has it worked out. So why, can I say it this way, are we so stupid to think now it'll work out? We're such good people. You see, it really goes in with Darwinism to say we've evolved to the place. Darwin said we evolved to the place where we don't need God anymore. Because he said God really was a survival mechanism. We created God so that we could face the future. We created him in our own mind. But now that we know the future because we know science and all these things that come together, Darwin says we don't need God anymore. Well, Marx came along with this, and he created an atheistic doctrine. We don't need God, and we are such good people that, again, given the opportunity, we would just give freely if we have ability, and we'd only take as much as we need if we do have need. And you have seen, though we don't completely live in a socialist Marxist society, you have seen examples of I don't know what the word I want to use is, the stingy nature of people, right? If you put out there, maybe there was a day, let's talk Halloween, okay? Isn't that pagan? We're not supposed to talk about Halloween, are we? But let's talk about Halloween anyway. When, years ago, before all of the hullabaloo about Halloween came up, and I'm not pro-Halloween or anything, but years ago, Halloween, when I was growing up and you were growing up, it was, shall we say, somewhat harmless. You dressed up like a clown or a ghost or whatever, and you said trick or treat, and you got candy and whatnot. I think years ago, I may be dreaming on this one, but I think years ago, and I'm going from a recollection I had when I was a child, not that I ever did dress up as a ghost and trick or treat. But as a child, I do remember going out trick or treating, and I remember on a number of occasions the person wasn't home and they would leave a bowl out there and say, take one. And we would take one and we would move on. And I'm pretty convinced that you couldn't do that today. That the first person would dump the bowl, it would be done with. Maybe it was that way then too, and I just forgotten all that. But I remember there was still candy there where it said take one. And we have this world in which if there's any kind of a crisis in town, one of the first things that happens is the looters come in. And why do the looters come in? Hey, it's a free-for-all. We can come in and we can take it. So I think there's a fundamental problem just in the understanding of life today. Now, to get back to that, the understanding of humanity today. To get back to that passage in the book of Acts, that group did live in a communal experience. But, as I've said a number of times, you do not build a doctrine off a historical example. And that is a historical example. It's not a teaching to live in a communal existence. It's an example of people people who were living in a communal existence. And furthermore, and I don't have time to go into this one, but I have taught it before, and that is that those people were gathered together expecting the kingdom of God to be delivered right unto them. And at that time, I think that's a time in which there's no need for individual possessions. We're about to receive the king, and he is about to come in, and judgment is about to come. So they had a completely different, if I could say, a different future ahead of them, and different circumstances call for some different things. Even the Jewish people, when they went back to their homeland in the early part of the last century, from, say, 1910 to 1948, when the nation was started, they started, you may remember, the kibbutz system. And a kibbutz was really communal living. They joined the kibbutz, and each according to his ability, and they took according to their need, and it was all owned socially. It was socialism. Many say, well, it's because they came out of Russia and Eastern Europe, and they were escaping, and that's what they knew. And that might be the case, but I don't really think that's the case completely, because as soon as they had opportunity, they gave up socialism. Today, there are many kibbutzim in Israel, and I think there's 2 of them that still live on a socialist system. The rest are all very capitalist. As soon as they could, they got rid of it. But you put them in that situation, and they're in the midst of what is going to be a country but is not yet a country, and they have 20 million enemies surrounding them. That's no time for capitalism, is it? That's a time for survival. And they were in that kind of survival mode, and they lived by necessity in that, hey, if I got it, you can take it. If you got it, and I need it. And they did that for a very short period of time, and then they moved on. Away from Marxism. Now, Karl Marx, I put on the outline, no greater failure yet so many followers. Really, the idea of Marx just has failed over and over and over again, and it's built on one single philosophy. And his philosophy is man has to have food and shelter before he'll do anything else. Now, that sounds kind of right, and I want you to be careful here before you just adopt that. Because that really is fundamental and foundational to society, to Marxism, so I want us to question it. Man has to have food and shelter before he'll do anything else. However, there is the word altruism, I think I'm looking for someone who's altruistic. They're motivated by something higher, by beauty, for example, by cause, by this motivation that they've got that is beyond food and shelter. And 10,000 cases we could give of people who are willing to starve, go hungry, live homeless, whatever, for their cause, right? And that's happened over and over and over again. So I really kind of basically disagree with him that man has to have food and shelter before he'll do anything else. Here's some similar statements. I remember when I was at the Baptist University getting my degree in business, one of the things they really taught us over and over again was Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Some of you probably have heard Maslow, Abraham Maslow, and his hierarchy of needs. It was kind of this pyramid, and it started at the bottom with, he called it, physiological needs. That's basically food and shelter. And when you have physiological needs, then you work your way up until the top was self-actualization. What they never told us in the Baptist University was this is Marxist socialism. That Maslow was a socialist, that what he was trying to create was a socialist society, and it begins, you say, well, we do need food and shelter. Yes, you put that as the basic need of man, and man is going to do anything to get that food and shelter. All of a sudden, you build this idea of the proletariat, the 99%, who eventually is going to take over because of what they have to have. Even the little statement, people don't know how much you I'll get it right. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That statement is the only time it's ever used is when we're saying you've got to give somebody some food before you can give them your knowledge or your philosophy. Again, all of these build into this Marxist idea And there are things that we need to be very careful about, like, are the physiological needs really our greatest needs? If you're hungry, you might be saying yes. I mean, there's certainly a huge matter in which physiological needs are our greatest needs. But have you ever heard of someone going on a hunger strike? Sure, you have. People have died going on hunger strikes. Why do they go on hunger strikes, even willing to go all the way to death? Well, because they have a higher need. There is some other cause for them that is greater even than food and shelter. Have you ever known anyone who ran away from home? Yeah, they didn't know what they were going to eat, where they were going to sleep, but there was some cause greater for them than having food and shelter. So I disagree with the fact that always and forever the physiological needs are the greatest needs. Now, I think the greatest failure of Marxism is it imagines a selfless man instead of a sinful man. The Bible's pretty clear about the state of man, and the state of man is that he is sinful. And being sinful, he is selfish. You've heard, we've said, what's in the middle of sin? I, thank you. Or the middle of pride, I. We have this I problem, basically, and it's this selfishness. Now, that doesn't go away once you have food and shelter taken care of, does it? But rather, it almost, perhaps even grows. Are any of you, don't raise your hand, I don't want somebody will be altruistic on me. But would you say in an ultimate sense all of us are satisfied with the food and shelter we have? No. We would, if we step to this level, then we want to step to the next level, and then to the next level, and then to the next level, and then we want the bigger house, and then we want the second house, and then we want the, instead of the potato soup that we were once happy with, now we want the steak, and this is our selfish nature that really is never satisfied. Only by Christ in you, the hope of glory, can we get a hold of this selfish self that is within us. Now, here's the Marxist method to put it all down for you. And again, I want to remind you this is a worldview study, not a Bible study, if you're wondering about it. But you'll see a lot of Marxism as you begin to look and see some of this into the world. So the Marxist method, first of all, Marx believed that value was determined by the cost of raw materials plus the cost of labor to put it together. That was value. Now, in its stupidest sense, that seems to be right. The value of something is what does it cost for the raw materials and for the people to put it together? That's its value. But we all know that that's not true. Because, for example, take, maybe your smartphone. And the cost of raw materials plus people to put it together is probably, I don't know the facts and figures on this, but my guess is it's pretty slim. If you have a $200 phone, it's probably $22 for material and labor. Everything else is research and development, the know-how, profit, all of those kind of things that go in it. Now, why do they not sell it for my made-up number of $22? Instead, they sell it for $200. Because it has a certain value to you that has nothing to do with the actual cost of raw materials. So Marx was wrong right from the beginning. So what he said is it's raw materials plus labor, everything else is profit. That's Marxism, and he believed that those who make that profit are gouging the poor. They're robbing from the poor. That it should be illegal for them to make that much. Does anyone today, by the way, do you ever hear the argument in American capitalist society that businessmen are making too much profit? Take an oil company, for example, not so much right now because they're not making so much profit. But there was a time in which, oil was cost $38 a barrel to get out of the ground and get to the store, and they were selling it for $100 a barrel. And they were gouging the poor. Shouldn't be doing this, right? Because anyone who takes anything beyond the raw materials plus the labor, that is profit. And profit actually belongs to whom, according to Marx? It belongs to mankind. So all profit should go to society. He didn't have a problem with you making up your cost of materials and labor, but everything else, that's your ability, to each according to his ability. That's how much you put in the pot, and others will, just take out. So what he did is call for the workers of the world to unite. In fact, the Communist Manifesto, you may remember, ends, if you haven't read it, you should. It's a pamphlet almost. It's not very long. But the Communist Manifesto ends with those words, workers of the world, unite. And his call was for the proletariat, the workers of the world, the 99%, if you will, to unite against that greedy, filthy, grimy businessman who's keeping that profit. They should not be allowed to keep that profit. Let me give an example that I hear from time to time. The sports star. He plays football or baseball or whatever, and he makes gajillion dollars, right? And it's not hard to find someone who says he should not be allowed to make a gajillion dollars. All he does is hit a ball, right? This is actually Marxism talking. Marxism says the value of that star is the cost of raw materials, that's a cheap football, and the labor. And he ought to get $38,000 a year or whatever. And that's the value of it. But again, that's not the value of it, right? Because you or someone like you will pay half a gajillion dollars for a ticket, right? To go watch this guy throw a ball or catch a ball or whatever it may be. And that guy in that stadium actually is what fills that stadium. And brings all of that about. You take him out and put me in, guess what? What happens to ticket prices? I have to pay to get people to come. Yes, exactly. So, does that guy deserve that much money? I say he does. If he can fill a stadium by the way he catches a ball, then he deserves every penny he can get out of that. There's some value there that really has to be associated again with that profit. Now, again, Marxism says nobody should be able to do that, and it doesn't literally cost that much for him to do what he's doing, and so he is robbing from the poor. And the poor ought to rebel against that and get their money from him. A few years ago, it hadn't been that long, has it? We had the, what was the Wall Street protesters that were camping out against the one percenters? For Occupy Wall Street. That's right, Occupy Wall Street. That is totally Marxism. Occupy. Who's occupying, by the way? The rich people? No, it was, again, I'll call them the 99%, the proletariat are saying those guys on Wall Street are making all this money, and yet what they've got is just profit. It's not value according to Marxism, it's just profit. And that should not be allowed, and we're going to take over. And as soon as the occupiers took over, guess what they were going to do with the money? Create a classless society where everybody had free alike, to each according to his ability, from each according to his need, and we would end up in utopian society again. And for some reason, another generation of young people especially, but it's not only young people, there's some old hippies too, that just say, oh yes, this is how the world, it's just not right that they're taking this money, and they began to work. So he called for the workers of the world to unite. He believed that when they did unite, utopia would result. And he believed also that there would have to be an interim period of time. So Marx created communism. He believed that it was not immediately going to go from greedy, grimy profiteers holding all the money to all of us share and share alike. So there would have to be someone to control this and control the economy. and really force the profiteers away from their profits. It was going to have to pry it out of their hands, and that was the Communist Party system that came along and created the Communist Party system, as you know, set prices. What did they set the prices based on? Not any kind of economic principles other than Marxism. They said the raw material is this, the cost of labor is that, therefore the price is X. And that's what the price is. And of course it ended up in utopia. Yeah, utopia where, right? If the closest thing you've got to utopia in the world today is a capitalist society. If you want to go somewhere good, you're going to have to go to someplace in capitalism. Well, let's look at the Communist Manifesto. There are 10 principles. I'm giving 6 of them here, and we'll talk about some of them to greater degree. But when you read all 10 principles, you see he's been pretty effective in the 110 or 15 years since he wrote the Communist Manifesto. He's been pretty effective at integrating those principles into society. Number 1 is the abolition of property and land and application of all rents of land to public purposes. That is, nobody should have private ownership. Land belongs to us. There is a famous American folk song that is far more communist and socialist than you know, and was written by someone who was very, very socialist. Woody Guthrie, that's right, Woody Guthrie, the communist. And of course, his song that we all know is, "This land is your land, this land is my land." Now, that, of course, we didn't know, I didn't anyway, when we were growing up singing that we were saying, let's all be communists. It is, this land is yours, it's ours. This land belongs to you and me. He was from Pampa, Texas, by the way, and I pastored in Pampa, Texas for a number of years. And I was on a community foundation that had, while I was on the board, a request for the creation of a Woody Guthrie museum in Pampa at the drugstore that he used to work at in downtown Pampa, and I was the lone person who voted no. Don't give him the money because he was a communist. And unless you want to say Woody Guthrie the communist and talk about socialism, they didn't want to do that. But we forget that this idea of public versus private land. Now, this is something that really is honestly growing in the world today and is a challenge for us. We live in a western state, of course, and the western states especially have this issue of public lands versus private lands. And you need to be very careful on some of these arguments because many of the arguments are brought forth by socialists that are protection of public lands. Now, they bring it out really nicely, but what they want to do is take more and more land as public land. Do you know that all the way back to Thomas Jefferson, he did something that still affects the way we do land today. Thomas Jefferson came up with this idea of segmenting all of what then was the public lands. In Thomas Jefferson's day, basically you had the 13 colonies that was pretty much private, and then you had all that out west, just from the Appalachians on west, that they were going to take, and of course Thomas Jefferson and the Louisiana Purchase and all that. Well, once the United States bought, say, the Louisiana Purchase, that was public lands. The government owned all of it, right? So he said, okay, what are we going to do with it? Do you know that in that day, by the way, and up until 1913, they didn't have taxation? There was no income tax. How in the world did the government pay for things? Basically, they sold off that land. For all those years, they sold parcels of land. Now, he is the one that devised, and I'm not terribly Jeffersonian, by the way. I'm more into the second president, Adams, his philosophy. But nonetheless, he's the one that devised parceling up public lands into these squares. And a 36-mile square was called, does anybody know? You're right. It's a township. A township is 6 miles that way, 6 miles that way, and it's a perfect square. And they're built on the meridians and all that kind of stuff. And there's thousands of townships across the country. We actually, right here in Taos, New Mexico, are not in a township. This section was never townshipped. And it was never townshipped because of Land grants, you got it. Okay, we got the appraisers on board. Land grants were, hey, that land was already granted by previous entities, in our case Spain or Mexico, was granted to someone else, so it was not public land to divide up in the first place. But every place else that was public lands, it was divided into these townships and perfect squares. Perfect townships were divided into sections. A section was 1 square mile, so there was 36 square miles in a township. And does anyone know what section number 16 was always used for? Schools, that's right. It was given for schools and public use. Now, basically, our founding fathers said all of it except, what would it be, 1/36th is going to be sellable. It's going to be public, it could be private land. Section number 16, save that because we believe in education. That was the founding fathers' idea. Now today, the public land in New Mexico is right at 50%, not 1/16th, but 50%. In the United States as a whole, it's about 40%. That is public land of some sort. Many states, it's over 50%. Number one, the abolition of property and land. Now, not only do you take that, but can you use your land? That's doesn't matter if you own it if you can't use it, right? And more governments are placing restrictions on private land. What does this mean? It means this is Marxism. Marxism says this belongs to everybody. You can't just take that and do what you want with it. It belongs to everybody. Principle number 2 is a heavy progressive or graduated income tax. That's that tax the rich kind of thing. Those who have more ability should pay more. And it's something that's loved by our society today. The abolition of all right to inheritance. Death taxes are a big one. Death taxes, if you read the people who are for death taxes or estate taxes, I think they like to call them, the pro-estate tax arguments will say, well, this only affects a very minority of the population, like 1%. What they're saying is, it is unethical for you to own more than $500,000. I think that's the death tax amount. If you own more than $500,000, that's unethical. We, the Marxists, should take it from you and pass it on. We're going to wait till you die so that you'll never feel it. Your kids will lose it. That is very, very much a Marxist idea. I think we ought to eradicate, by the way, all estate taxes, is my opinion. And if I'm elected... Number 4, the confiscation of property of all immigrants and rebels. Now, immigrants is spelled with an E there. Do you know the difference between immigrants with an E and immigrants with an I? One's coming, one's going. Immigrants with an E are going. So this is the idea that if you're going, you can't take it with you. That really is a Marxist idea. And I think, we even see this in our current president, don't we? You can't take wealth out of the country. If you do, we're going to tax it away from you. Why can't you take your wealth out of the country? Because it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to us. And you're taking it away from us. Again, it's a socialist idea. Number 5. The centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank and state capital and an exclusive monopoly, a monopoly on currency. I won't get into this one too much, but if you study Bitcoin very much, it's a currency that tries to bypass government. And the U.S. government, in the time that Bitcoin has come about, with just the last, say, 5 years, the U.S. government has come down very hard on controlling Bitcoin because Bitcoin is a threat to the currency monopoly, where it says only the state can provide you something that we call money. And Bitcoin avoids the state, this state, another state, every state, every sovereign entity. Number 6, free education for all children in public schools. Now, again, that one sounds really nice, but that one is so quickly expanding, isn't it? And again, even the Founding Fathers said, give Section 16 to public education. That's what we want it used for because we believe in an educated citizenry. I do too. But have you noticed today, public education is now starting as early as 2 or 3 years old, and they want it free all the way through. In the last election, it was free college for everybody, right? Or maybe it was just junior college. I don't remember how far they went up to. Again, sounds really good, but it's who pays for free education? We do, and not just we, but specifically the people who have the most. Why do they pay for it? Because they have the most ability. To each according to his ability, to everyone according to his need. Now, just down the road in Santa Fe, soon to come to a city near you, they just voted on soda tax. And I am always amused just a little bit, by the way, how those, how the leftist rebel rousers of Taos. There's only a few. The leftist rebel rousers of Taos typically say, we don't want to be like Santa Fe. We don't want to be like Santa Fe. But I promise you, in a New York minute, they'll try to do the soda tax like Santa Fe. I don't like it because I drink soda. Yes, this is exactly right. Now, what the soda tax is, of course, it's supposed to go to education, specifically education for whom? 2 and 3 year olds, that's right. Because there's this idea the state needs to take care of, you give your children to the state very early on. They'll create a utopia. And how in the world can we pay for the state to raise these children other than taxing someone? And soda is totally unnecessary. Even I agree with this. Soda is totally unnecessary. It's not one of the physiological needs. So if you drink soda, you must have more than you need. And if you have more than you need, that's called ability. So those with greater ability, they're the ones that pay for it in order to take care of the need. Again, it's all Marxist thinking. Well, 4 errors of Marxism, if I haven't already brought them up. One is poor economics. The value, again, is not just raw material plus labor costs, but rather value is what someone is willing to pay for a product, right? If you can go both ways on this. There are products that the raw material plus the labor costs more than anybody would pay for it, right? So guess what? It's basically not created because there's no value for that. Doesn't matter how much it costs you to make or to do. That's why there's subsidies. You're exactly right. This error in bad economics actually led to state control of prices and wages. Value is X raw labor plus materials, and so we're going to say you can't sell it any more than this. And that is true. Labor is the biggest one we see in the United States in terms of price control. There's a lot of price control in other places too, but labor very much you're seeing in price control in that it is said that an employer must pay X amount of dollars. Now, what they're doing is artificially setting the value. It's a Marxist idea that you can determine the value of something. And I'm convinced, or the opposite of Marxism is the value is what somebody will pay for it. You have to let market forces set that. It really is very much growing, and even the state control of prices. Our legislature just either passed or was debating anyway. I don't know if they passed it. The more cigarette tax. I happen not to smoke. Gas tax is another one. Yeah, I happen not to smoke, but I do drive. So there's a part of me that says, well, good, let the smokers pay for it, right? And yet I don't go down that path for principle, because next thing they're going to make the soda drinkers pay for it, right? Or the churchgoers pay for it, or anybody who's spending their money on some frivolous kind of thing. We got to take that money away from them because obviously they have more than they need, and we'll control prices that way. And bring that up. So it's poor economics. Number two, it's poor psychology. It assumes that if we have plenty, we'll give it. That's bad psychology, because the truth is, if we have plenty, we want a little bit more. We just never have plenty. So bad psychology to begin with. And it's also bad psychology in the sense of we won't take any more than we need. That might be true today. Give it a day or two, and you'll find that that is not true, and again, proven over and over. It's bad futurism. It envisions a utopia rather than a dismantling of society due to godlessness. It thinks that, like Darwinism, society is just going to get better and better and better, and if we can just get rid of those greedy, grimy businessmen, then everything will be perfect. That's bad futurism, and it's bad theology, because Marxism is atheist at its core. It replaces God with the party or the state and carries this out. Okay, I'm out of time, but let me go ahead and say you might be a Marxist if. Number one, if you believe that the problems of society could be overcome by overthrowing owners and ownership. If you believe, therefore, in limiting the ability to own or to use that which you own, I might say, this is a Marxist idea. If you believe that government should solve our economic or physiological problems, you might be a Marxist. Now, I got, just as I was coming in here, a little alert. Let's see. White House vows plan will offer insurance to every American. That's called Marxism. Whether it comes from Republicans or Democrats, here it is. You believe that the government should solve our economic and physiological problems. One of our physiological problems is sometimes we have to go to the doctor, right? And Marxism says it is our physical health and well-being that motivates everyone, and you must provide that for everybody. That's very much a socialist idea. Do you know, by the way, that in capitalist countries that don't have health care. I don't know if there's any left. Don't have public health care. And I got onto Nathan for calling it this yesterday, and I'm going to back up and say health care and health insurance are two different things. So let me back up and say, capitalist countries that didn't have health insurance, like ours a number of years ago, that didn't have publicly provided health insurance, guess what? People were taken care of, weren't they? And the government does not have to provide all of these things. If you believe that Christ came to set people free from economic poverty, then you're a Marxist. There is this growing movement. It started in Catholicism in South America. It's called liberation theology. And then it came into mainstream Protestant churches, and now it's very much in evangelical churches that the sin is holding wealth while others are poor. If you're wealthy in the face of poverty, that is sin. And righteousness is wealth distribution. You give that out. This is liberation theology, but again, it's come into evangelical churches. Evangelism has become meeting physiological needs. Now, I don't have any way to measure this, but just this is my observant observation. Is that that sounds kind of redundant, doesn't it? This is my observation in looking at missions and evangelism programs around the world. More often than not now, they are Peace Corps kind of operations. They are taking care of physiological needs, building houses, digging water wells, providing fish or whatever it is, clothes, all that. And we call that missions. I think there used to be a day when that was called humanitarianism. I'm all for humanitarianism, by the way. Help a brother in need. No, there's certainly ought to be even that desire within us. But that's not missions. Missions is sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. And missions, I'm convinced, can be done without providing a meal, a house, a water well, all this kind of stuff. Missions can be done without all of that. In fact, I think the Apostle Paul is a pretty good example of of that. There's a book that came out a few years ago called Radical. Even as I read the book Radical, as everybody around me was saying, oh, this is so wonderful, I was saying, this is Marxist. And it put a tremendous amount of guilt on you if you lived in anything other than a cardboard hovel. You had too much. And you had bought into the American dream, and you should rid yourself of the American dream because the American dream is sinful. The American dream is, I don't know, getting at least as far as your parents got, maybe a little bit farther. How do you define the American dream? But the book Radical very much said you need to live a radical life. And a radical life had everything to do with the size of your house, the value of your cars. If you lived in a small house and drove an old used car, then you live a radical life. That's, again, the whole premise of the book. That is liberation theology, and that has come to a church near you. Now, with all of that, if you all are able to afford sodas, then you should give more to the offering. Had to end on a humorous note. Let's have a word of prayer.